Okay, so today we'll talk about an architect and an engineer. We'll start with Minoru Yamasaki, who was born in 1913 and died at 73 in 1986. Most famously known as the author of the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers, which fell to the ground, as you know. So Minoru Yamasaki was born in December 1913, but died on the 6th of October, 6th of February 1986. Was a Japanese-American architect, best known for designing the original World Trade Center in New York City and several other large-scale projects. Yamasaki was one of the most prominent architects of the 20th century. He and fellow architect Edward Darrell Stone are generally considered to be the two master practitioners of new formalism. Interesting to compare perhaps functionalism with formalism, because they might be the two sides of the same coin. This was the man. I understood he was, he started his adult life under problematic circumstances, because his parents were Japanese, and you know what happened in the Second World War. And he was poor, he struggled, he had all kinds of jobs in order to educate himself, but obviously a very capable man. And he was able in the end to build not just the World Trade Center, but other buildings quite remarkable in size and function. So Minoru Yamasaki, what is it about these Japanese that they are so successful in architecture? Like the Dutch and the Japanese are special, so to speak, in the field of architecture. And not only architecture, but Japan, as you know, probably has the largest number of Pritzker winners in the whole world. And there are, of course, much bigger countries than Japan. And yet, Japan is leading. Minoru Yamasaki, who died on this day, February 6th, and that's why we talk about him. But when I was studying his work, I came to this, these are my words, non-critical globalism. Because I have the feeling that despite his skill as an architect, he didn't manifest a critical stance vis-a-vis globalism. So his architecture is globalist in character. It's not, it is not serving localism, but rather globalism. And it is not critical. And I think if, for example, the critical regionalism, because that's what I was pointing towards with this possible, title for something about him. If we have critical regionalism, why shouldn't we also have critical globalism? But his globalism is non-critical. And I'll try to elaborate this a little further. North Shore Congregation, Israel. This is a religious building. I mean, like Edward Darrell Stone, he employs this, I don't know very well how to describe it, some kind of an organic academism, which is a contradiction in terms, because what is academic or, academic, or which points towards academies, is in a way the opposite of, the organic. But you see here the forms he employs, and yet the building is rather academic. You have the same motif repeated identically a number of times, but still the building is interesting, both outside and inside. What is interesting with Minoru Yamasaki is that his work is modernist, yes, but and sometimes corporate modernist or corporate modernism. But he also somehow makes something happen in his building, even at the World Trade Center, which transcends somehow the corporate culture and the globalist culture and points towards something else. Even here, you know, there is a certain ambiguity at work here. I hope I have an image from the inside. Yes. So we have structure. The structure is very clearly defined, but it's an ornamental structure. It's a decorative structure. It is structure. It functions as structure, but he treats it aesthetically in such a way that structure becomes less rigid, and it becomes more fluid, more feminine in a way, more decorative, more ornamental. And the influences come not only from maybe, let's say, Middle Ages, a little bit, you know, some Gothic, you know, touches or, you know, elements, but also from other cultures, like even Muslim. And what is strange here is that this is built for Israel. I mean, for this is a Jewish congregation. Interesting, these ambivalence, these ambiguities, I think. And the architecture is not an avant-garde architecture by any means, but it's an architecture which has something official about it, but with a certain sensitivity done, which makes it you know, less rigid than what usually we call official or official architecture. There is a certain sensibility at work here. And I don't know when he built this, you know, maybe it's certainly, you know, after 1960s. But I think this work even today is maybe more than acceptable, is to be appreciated, if not even embraced, because it has structural integrity. Also, it has aesthetical concerns, and he is able to negotiate between the two. I mean, look at the ceiling, you know, which is also the roofing. I mean, too bad the resolution. I hope no, I don't have a better picture, unfortunately. But this is looking upwards. Looks almost like a, you know, a modernistic interpretation of some kind of Gothic church, if not cathedral. Minoru Yamasaki. Is there something Japanese in his work? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. But the Japanese are very capable of importing elements from other cultures and then transform them through their own sensitivity. And being that they are very hardworking and very rigorous, very precise, they achieve very special results very often. They did so, and they do so, and they will do so. Minoru Yamasaki. Now, the Northwestern National Life building, and look at this. You know, again, it's a building that could infuriate someone who is against capitalism, for example, because what is the function of this building? It's probably some kind of an insurance company, you know, Northwestern National Life building. There must be an insurance company. So it's capitalistic through and through. But look at this immense, you know, giant portico. Its emphasis, is it justified? I mean, you know, this is the institution of making money. Making money on the basis of the fears of the population. Because, you know, if you turn on the radio or the TV, what do you hear? Are you over 50? Are you insured? You are not insured? Wow, you have to insure immediately. So it's all about fear. You know, fear of getting old, fear of getting sick, fear of dying. So then, yes, you put your money into the insurance company, into national building, national life, whatever that means, national life. And they build these, you know, emphatic structures with your money. Now, I don't know. I mean, ethically, I am a little bit turned off, you know, for by this kind of glorious, you know, monumental structure, which is some kind of a temple, you know, the temple of money, you know, because that's what it is. It is the temple of money built on the fear of people, fear of sickness, fear of getting old, fear of dying. And they build monuments. And Minoru Yamasaki helped them. Yes, the building has some qualities, but what turns me off is its, you know, Apollonian glory, which is based essentially on speculating the vulnerability of people. It's very officious, not official, it's very officious, this architecture. And it really surprised me that Bernard Tschumi seems to like very much Minoru Yamasaki. And Bernard Tschumi was always an avant-gardist, a deconstructivist. He was one of the 7 deconstructivists, well, 7 groups, because at least Kop Himmelblau had 2 partners. So there were actually 8 people, but he was one of them. As a deconstructivist, this building is the very opposite of deconstruction. You know, this rhythm, you know, equal spacing between the columns, and you know, everything seems to be under control, you know, the national life building. Anyway, not that it is a bad building, but you know, from here to, you know, echoes in our own country, you know, a communist country which built palaces for those in power, is not a long distance. This is more sleek, of course, more sophisticated, more nuanced, but in essence is about serving power, those in power. And I feel it's something very questionable at the very bottom of the program. But you could say the architect is not responsible for this. The architect responded to being commissioned, and he built to the best of his knowledge what we look at here. But it still bothers me that it's non-critical. That's what I meant by a non-critical globalism. While Kenneth Frampton talked about a critical regionalism. And I keep thinking, if there is a critical regionalism, there should be also a critical globalism. But this is a non-critical globalism. It's splendid. No, it is splendid. But there is a falseness behind the splendor. I would say, look at it. You know, you say with such buildings on Earth, we are gods-like, and you know, everything is fine in the world. But we know very well it is not so. So it's not just about aesthetics. It's not just about the, you know, let's call it the beauty of the building. It's also about the morality of the building, the ethics of the building. You make this, you know, the meeting between the columns and the ceiling, you know, with some kind of Gothic, modernistic Gothic undertones, but this is not a church. This is not a cathedral. This is a speculative, you know, big company which gets bigger and bigger, richer and richer. Well, you could say the church does the same thing, and maybe there is some truth there. Now, we look at a very interesting project from 1962, the Pacific Science Center in Seattle, so on the western coast of the United States. And why do I say it's interesting? Because of this Gothic undertone, or these Gothic or Gothicist undertones that animate even a science project. I mean, a building dedicated to science, Pacific Science Center. And look at this. I mean, who would do something like this today? You know, a science center which has these, you know, these structures which are, you know, in good measure, useless. I mean, they are huge, but they are equally useless. And the Gothic motif is for all to see. But what does this have to do with science? Maybe he wanted to say science is our new religion, or it was our new religion, you know, mid-century, 1960s. It is a surprising architecture, by all means. And I wonder what these people who pass by there think and feel. You know, what is the relationship between science and religion? What is the relationship between a center dedicated to science and, you know, the cathedral fragment, or the, in a way, it's like a fragment of a cathedral, or several. Also interesting to point out is the fact that the structure becomes ornamental. It is definitely structure, but the way he, you know, builds it is actually ornamental in equal measure. So here you see this is also by him. I mean, here are again Gothicist motifs which became decorative, and this might be problematic, and applied more or less to rather rectangular buildings, like here too. So all this complex was done by him, culminating with these ghosts, architectural ghosts of splendid Gothic past. I don't know. I mean, are we to trust science as being the great solver of all problems? This year, there are 400 years since the birth of Blaise Pascal, the great French philosopher and scientist. He was a great mathematician and also believer, even if maybe with some doubts. For example, Blaise Pascal was the one who said, the heart has its own reasons, which reason doesn't know. So let's say it again. The heart has its own reasons, which reason doesn't know. So he seemed to advocate the cause of the heart. Doing so, he was a Christian, but he was also a scientist. So he struggled between science and religion. What we see here is also some kind of an ambivalence, you know, a center dedicated to science with Gothic motifs. I don't know if he inspired himself from cathedrals. Maybe he inspired himself from Venice, you know, because of course Venice is eternally fashionable. But I don't know. It's something to me, to my taste, my critical, you know, appetite, a little bit problematic here. You know, is it truly a correct expression, architectural expression of what science is? You know, in its sweetness, this decorative treatment of the facade seems to say that science is all about grace, is gracefulness, but I'm not so sure about it. And these strange things are, you know, how are we to interpret them? What do they mean? Could we call science the new cathedral or the new religion? Did Minoru Yamasaki think of these matters? I don't know. Anyway, he built them. You see, they are prefabricated. They are huge. Also, I think it's worth pointing out this modernist, because he was a modernist architect or a modern architect. He didn't turn his back on ornament. Much of his architecture has a lot to do with ornamentation. And indeed, you cannot have structure without ornament. So he was a rather unusual modernist. After all, we read at the beginning that he was associated with a movement, the new formalism, not functionalism, but formalism. This is perhaps something worth thinking about. In other words, he was a new formalist. Now, I don't know who the old formalists were. He was considered one of the new formalists, like Edward Darrell Stone as well. Is there logic in his work? Yes, there is. But there is also the ornamental side of his work where logic becomes less adequate to use. Anyway, in the 60s, the United States was doing very well. There was some kind of an optimism that the United States is saved and saves and will save the world. And, the architecture had to be splendid. Although there is, and there will be a lot of poverty in the United States, but these mega projects do not say anything about poverty, like that project for the national, life building. You would say, looking at that building, that there is no poverty in the United States, where I have to tell you, there is a lot of poverty. I lived there for many years, and I know what I'm saying. But that poverty is not shown on TV, it's not shown through the red carpet of Hollywood or through the movies from Netflix or HBO. No, of course not. Now, what is this? Another corporation, this time for education. Horace Mann Educators Corporation, Springfield, Illinois, 1972. Again, centralist corporate building, maybe correct somehow, from a certain point of view, but it leaves me cold. I mean, it's a building that serves power, the power of the corporation, even if you say it's the power of education, because it's the corporation of a corporation destined for education. But it looks like an embassy. It looks like you can see this is a governmental building or a corporate building, and that's what it is. I don't see anything really about education. It's about the power of corporation. It's officious. I don't particularly like it. Now, a temple, again, a religious building, Michigan, 1973, Minoru Yamasaki. Yeah, I guess, if you pass by it, you would say this must be some kind of a religious building. Okay, let's call it a temple. It's almost a typical North American creation, so without doubts, in a way, so sure of itself. Although some doubting maybe is implied in the fact that this curvature here is different from what is going above, and so there is a surface which has its problem, so to speak, because of its it's relativity, and this is shown inside as well. But it's perfectly symmetrical, it's perfectly central, and thus, in my opinion, is not sufficient, is non-critical. Yes. Now, should a religious building be critical? Maybe yes, in our time, yes. Because we don't have the faith of the Middle Ages. No. And how do we express that? I mean, you look at this monumental structure, but at the bottom is a Cartesian box flat and wide and long. And yes, you have some decorations there, some ornaments. I don't know. It's a little bit conveniently done, but at least in this picture, it seems to have a certain mystery, so to speak, although it's excessively central and symmetrical. But the curvatures express some kind of a longing for the unmeasurable. Century Plaza Towers, Los Angeles, 1975. Look at them. I mean, welcome to capitalism. Welcome to Los Angeles. They are in a way perfect containers of office workers. Countless office workers work in these containers. Are they glorious? Well, they are in a way in terms of great engineering, the height, the dimensions, but architecture is not very, is not very eventful really. But they are impeccably done, actually. But there are many such buildings in the United States. He was one of the architects who built them. There are so many. Any big city in the United States has such buildings. At least he played with the triangle, But again and again, this is a non-critical globalism. It's non-critical because in no way it expresses, it serves actually, the corporate culture with all its means. Fortunately, there are human beings who pass by and they bring in some life, and the buildings are, that they are majestic in a way, indifference to the human silhouettes and the human life. They are, impeccable containers of the human drama, if we are to call it so. Did he build these too? Maybe, but I personally prefer the towers, but maybe he did this as well. Anyway, this is an architecture of power, built for power. BOK Tower in Tulsa, 1975, and the tower it is. Yeah. At the bottom, the building is trying to, soften its image by employing a certain historicism, but I would say rather unconvincingly, but conveniently, with these arches. But if we compare these arches with what Louis Khan did at Dhaka in Bangladesh, we see two different kinds of architects. Khan was much more radical, but that's why Khan was not commissioned by the United States the way Minoru Yamasaki was. Instead, he was commissioned by one of the poorest countries in the world at that time, and that is Bangladesh. But Bangladesh had the intuition that Khan had genius and invested in him. First, trust, and thus Dhaka came into being. I mean, the administrative, political, center of the capital of Bangladesh. This building actually bothers me a little because of its complacence in being non-critical again. It's like these buildings that Minoru Isozaki built, including the World Trade Center, which I saw. I was in its shadow, and I never got up to the top to see the city, from above, as all tourists went. It never impressed me, those two towers. They never impressed me. They were huge, and they were crushing. The human beings were just small insects in their shadows. Rainier Tower, Seattle, 1977. This one at least is adventurous at the bottom, maybe too adventurous. I'm sure certain engineers in our country, and maybe not only in our countries, our country would protest. But anyway, he elevated this, huge prism on top of that base, which is, it's kind of a, pedestal that could make one tremble a little bit considering the scale. A strange building, really, by all means. Because usually at the low level, you try to open up towards the street, towards the life of the street, towards people. But here, this pedestal, at least from this level up, is opaque. Is I don't know. It's strange. It's strange, and obviously it requires some engineering acrobacy. He did it. Well, he did it because, the triumphalist ideology of the United States at that time was almost without limits. So, all the money in the world that were there, and why not build in this way? But it does look strange. You look at this first floor or ground floor, which is so pedestrian and so, dwarfed by this massive thing. I mean, this is truly huge. And then the true hugeness happens from here upwards. Very, very strange buildings. I wish I had more pictures to agitate me even further. Anyway, now the Federal Reserve Bank, Richmond, 1978, will get tired of this globalist non-critical architecture because really, such excessive and explicit formalizations of power in architectural terms could be tiring. Washington Square, Minneapolis, 100, another sky, not really a skyscraper compared to what we already saw, but he had skill, at least in this building, he didn't employ the horizontal long window, the emblematic horizontal long window that modernity so often employed, but narrow and tall vertical windows. This is something worth observing and thinking about. The windows he used, because modern architecture in general, even for Frank Lloyd Wright, was supposed to be horizontal and turn around the corner, certainly not narrow and vertical. He uses vertical windows. Now, Frank Lloyd Wright said that I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. We got disconnected. Do you hear me? Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
Just a second. I really don't understand what happened. Just a second, because I have to activate the presentation. Sorry about this. Okay, so we continue with Minoru Yamasaki. Sorry about this short disruption of the presentation. I got disconnected from Zoom. I was saying about this, field of narrow vertical windows. Okay, now a building in Madrid, Torre Picasso. Of course, it had to be Picasso. Now, what does this have to do with Picasso, really? It's a question one should ask. But it is called Torre Picasso, Madrid. When was it made? In 1988. I mean, it could have been, Torre I don't know, El Greco, or I don't know, Salvador Dali, or even Goya, if you abstract to such an extent, as he did. Why is it Torre Picasso? I don't know. That's how it is called. A glorious tower, very, unchallenged by doubting or by the shadows of art. What I dislike here is the base. I guess he tried to negotiate with the ground level, but it's too, I don't know, too convenient and too predictable, it didn't need this tower, abstract as it is, to have this kind of pedestal, I think, or this kind of base. It looks better without it, from far away. Of course, in contrast with the buildings, the beautiful trees, not trees, the beautiful mountains behind are truly the ones worthy of our, appreciation. But the mountains were not made by human architects, but by someone else. Anyway, the Picasso Tower in Madrid, Minoru Yamasaki, heliport on top, of course. What would Picasso as a tower do without one? The typical tower. The core have services and elevators, staircases, and then around offices. Now we arrive at the Twin Towers. We are approaching the end of this presentation on Minoru Yamasaki. Of course, everybody knows the former World Trade Center, the Twin Towers. And actually, he had a good idea I don't know if it was his idea to build two towers and not just one, as it is now the case. I read something about this. People appreciate very much that he built two towers. But I don't know if this was in the program or it was his idea, his proposal. Anyway, that's how they were built. And you know what happened to them. It's still unbelievable what happened to them. There are many conspirational theories because it's so unreal what happened. How could it be that some planes enter these buildings? How could it be? Here we see.
We cannot see the presentation.
Pardon?
We cannot see the presentation. It's not on search screen.
But you should have told me, God. Here I am trying. I was trying to choose my. Why didn't you wait until the very end? Now it's good that you told me now, but it's so late. I was talking like an idiot here about images which you didn't see. Okay, I think I know why. Sorry about this. I have to reactivate the screen. I guess when I got disconnected, this function got disconnected too. Sorry about this. Now you see it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry about this. So I start again from this current slide with this tower, the Picasso Tower in Madrid. Maybe I should, yeah, from here, Torre Picasso, Madrid, 1988, Minoru Yamasaki. And I was saying that why is it called Picasso? In what way it relates with Picasso? It could have been named with the name of another Spanish artist. But okay, we accept. It's the Torre Picasso. A typical tower, I said that I personally dislike this base. with that convenient academic arch, all nice and easy. But if we call the tower Picasso, that was not the spirit of Picasso at all. Although Picasso said that he learned how to paint in 4 years like Raphael, and to paint like a child in a lifetime. But this building was built, I mean, again, why is it called Picasso? Does it express in any way the personality of Picasso? No, it doesn't. It's just, artificially called the Torre Picasso. That's because we as architects are still not accustomed to do a narrative architecture. For example, if you do a Salvador Dali tower, that Salvador Dali tower should be different from the Pablo Picasso tower, because they were very different artists. But we don't do this because we don't narrate through our buildings. We don't do a narrative architecture. And that is a problem. I think there is great potential for a narrative architecture. But we are not accustomed to think in these terms, that a tower, dedicated to Picasso should have something of the personality of the painter expressed in the building. Otherwise, why do we call it Picasso? It could have been called the Franco Tower, or I don't know. Anyway, this is the tower in Madrid, built by Minoru Yamasaki, the Picasso Tower, and I mentioned the heliport on top of the tower, and this rather, in my opinion, unsuccessful base or pedestal on which the building, abstract as it is, stands. But I think he had this difficulty, how to marry the purity of the prism at the level of meeting the ground. And yeah, it is not an easy problem. It is a challenge, but I don't think he negotiated properly, because the architecture of what is here has nothing to do with the architecture of what is here. There are two different architectural languages. The plan, as I said, with the typical office tower with circulations in the center, and elevators, restrooms, staircases, and so on. The Twin Towers. Now we arrive at the well-known Twin Towers, World Trade Center, the two towers that he built and that came down dramatically, as we know. And yes, people still don't quite believe it, and I still don't quite believe it. How could it be? How could it be in the 21st century to have this sort of tragedy? One thing is for sure, they don't exist any longer. I was surprised to read a few days ago that Thomas Maine, the celebrated North American architect who was the founder of his office, Morphosis, apparently he stated in an interview that he seemed to be rather sympathetic towards the terrorists. And this surprised me. We are talking about a winner of the Pritzker Prize, a very well-known architect in the United States, a North American architect, claiming that he doesn't lament the falling of the towers. In a way, he shows some sympathy towards what what we call the terrorists stood for. Interesting. But look at this building. Yes, it was done magnificently, but with the same kind of I almost feel like saying distortion, historicist distortion of modernism in the name of some kind of an influence coming from, I don't know, maybe even the Gothic times, maybe, I don't know, a certain sensibility that he showed from the very beginning. Not Isamu Noguchi, but Minoru Yamasaki. Isamu Noguchi was another important Japanese, but an artist who even studied for a while with Brinkush, a very important artist, Isamu Noguchi. But we talk now about Minoru Yamasaki. We already saw in some of the previous buildings that we looked at the aesthetics of Minoru Yamasaki. And they were done here at even larger scale in New York City for these buildings that celebrated what? The World Trade Center was the ultimate capitalist institution concerned with, dominating the world through commercial means, through financial speculations and manipulations. This is what this huge pair of towers served. These two towers were not built for cultural reasons, spiritual reasons. They were built for capitalistic, exacerbated interests. That's what they were made for, and that's why they fell the way they fell, because other people were irritated by them. Through these two towers, the United States dominated the world. Not only through them, of course, there are many other towers, not only in New York City, but in many other cities in the United States, and now in many other cities in the world. But there was a kind of quintessential, symbolic of a domineering capitalism concerned with money, money, and money again. And, as it is said, what goes up one day will go down. And they went down tragically, as we know. It happened that I was in New York City 2 weeks after the terrible tragedy. I was actually moving back to Romania, and I had to send some of my things from New York back to Romania. So 2 weeks after what happened, September 11, I arrived at LaGuardia Airport in New York City, and it was a very different New York. Lots of militaries with rifles on their chests at the corners of the streets. It was a very tense atmosphere. And I have to tell you, many streets from the site of World Trade Center, of the former World Trade Center, so at a long distance from the site of it was blocked. You couldn't walk close to the site of the tragedy, but it was a terrible smell in the air, even 20 blocks away from the site of World Trade Center. It was indeed a major tragedy. And I read once in an airplane, in a newspaper, I think a British newspaper, saying, a journalist said that he traveled many times to New York City, and here was a city always capable to renew itself, rejuvenate itself almost immediately, but not in this case. In this case, it took them a very, very, very long time to rebuild one tower, and the psychology of the New Yorkers was affected dramatically by what happened then. Anyway, on the other hand, Susan Sontag, a very important intellectual, North American intellectual, well, she died a number of years ago. At that time, what I'm trying to say is there were North Americans rather courageous who expressed opinions which were not in line with the official, perception about, the big tragedy. And Susan Sontag said, we can accuse the terrorists of many things, but not that they didn't have courage. And I believe it is true. I mean, try to imagine, you know, coordinating themselves in that way and now going directly towards death, knowing that they were going to die. Try to imagine being in the pilot pit and moving with great speed, a plane speed towards World Trade Center. Anyway, here is Minoru Yamasaki, rather cocky and, you know, a little bit playboy-like, you know, with the bow tie and the drafting board and all the rest, you know, a successful man. What can you say? I understood he had some troubles in his marriage, his first marriage, or I think he remarried his first wife. Something happened. You can find out on Wikipedia. Anyway, he was an interesting man, and he was an interesting man also because he started in very unauspicious circumstances. He was very poor. He was Japanese, and the Japanese were not seen with the favorable eyes after the tragedy of Second World War, and yet he succeeded in amazing ways, and he even built what you look at right now. Anyway, here it is. As I said to you, I think I had been here in the shadow of the big towers. I'd even entered the hallways, but I never went up to the last floor to the terrace to watch New York City from above, as many tourists went. But I had a good friend who worked in an architecture office in one of these towers, and I visited him once or twice, and that's why I entered World Trade Center. But I never truly liked these towers because they were, you know, they were in a way untouchables. They were unreachable because of their size. Now they are gone, as you know. Minoru Yamasaki. In his wildest nightmare, he would not have envisioned what happened to his towers. No, impossible. It was surreal. I had a friend who went to work on that day, September 11, and he was moving at a certain distance from World Trade Center, and he told me that the traffic stopped, and he got out of the car, and he actually saw one plane entering one of the towers, and everybody thought it was some kind of a, you know, a Hollywood movie or something, that it was something staged that couldn't be real. Everybody stopped their cars because the traffic was stopped, but nobody believed what they actually saw because it was unbelievable indeed. Now I end this presentation on Minoru Yamasaki with new proposals for World Trade Center, but we know one was already built. The competition was won by Daniel Lipskind, but the tower was built by SOM, by David Childs from SOM, Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. Let's see some proposals that were made to rebuild the World Trade Center. This is kind of interesting. I don't know who made this proposal to have just the exoskeleton of the towers, and you know, without content, without actually usable you know, floors, kind of like architectonic ghosts of what once was there. I think it was an interesting idea, but of course it was not you know, it didn't have the chance to be you know, implemented because, you know, every square inch in Manhattan, everywhere, not just in that area, is immensely expensive. Who would build something like this for nothing, in a way, meaning, you know, a useless giant pair of structures. Now, this might have been, yes, this one by Daniel Lipskind. He won the competition, but it was not built what he proposed. I don't know who did this. Maybe, yeah, Peter Eisenman. Peter Eisenman proposed this, you know, could we call them towers? These grids, vertical grids, actually. I don't know what to think of them. I mean, you could speculate, on the meaning of a grid. It's almost like an architectonic prison of some sort, the prison of capitalism, the prison of high bureaucracy, the prison of money, the prison of speculative work and profit making. Maybe I don't know if Peter Eisenman thought about this in these terms. I don't know. It was rejected. It was not built, as you know. So this was Peter Eisenman on the site of the World Trade Center. He always loved the grid. That's why he said any architectonic project has to start with the grid. And then he started in his later projects, but not only, also in his early works, he problematized the grid, he deformed it. He started with the grid and then he started to sabotage it. But here it is not sabotaged. It's two vertical grids and the moon on the blue sky. Now I don't know who did this one. Another proposal which was not built. The architects got wild. Of course, it was a great moment to jump in and make sometimes utopian proposals, or architects are very easy to be seduced into some kind of a limitless exuberance. This one, a different kind of work. No, I don't remember who made this proposal. Certainly not Minoru Yamasaki. And this might have been Sir Norman Foster. Obviously, the question of scale didn't preoccupy them. The taller the better, the bigger the better. It was all about domineering still. But I wonder why, but no, this would not have been the appropriate place to build a Hamletian tower, meaning a tower of doubts, the tower of doubts, in a way to internalize the pain and also to reflect on the reasons of this terrible tragedy, why this happened. It seems that all these towers actually do not, maybe a little bit you could say here there is some kind of a turmoil, but in general, the proposals were made to replace already crashingly tall towers with some even taller and even bigger. This might have been, yes, I think it was Sir Norman Foster, always saying, I'm here, I'm present, Atsum, as Konstantin Neuka would have said, I'm here, I'm present, jumping on the occasion, as he's jumped now in Ukraine. And he's almost 90, if not over 90. And of course, another great opportunist, Bjarke Ingels, he couldn't miss the occasion either, proposing this. Fortunately, it was not built. This is, of course, the new tower built by David Childs from SOM, which is probably indestructible, but it's not very graceful as an architecture. But maybe it was never meant to be graceful in any way. So I think we arrived at the end of this presentation on Minoru Yamasaki. No, before I end, I have a few images. I lived in Chicago, well, in a suburb of Chicago, Evanston, for about 5 years. And I had a small so-called gallery or architecture gallery, which was more like a studio. But I displayed a proposal for World Trade Center done by someone who teaches at Minku now, that is, what's his name? I'm beginning to get to have some problems with my memory because I have many Justin Baroncha. Justin Baroncha made this proposal, which I like very much. It was inspired by the Kiss by Brâncuș, and he imagined two towers, a black one and the white one embracing. And I wrote here a text, which I displayed in the windows of my gallery, called not World Trade Center, not WTC, but WEC, World Embrace Center, as opposed to World Trade Center. That's what this long text was about, and this was an image of a model that Justin Baroncha did. I like his proposal. If it had a problem was that the first, the first World Trade Center, the squares of the plan of the two buildings were not aligned. These were aligned, and this might have been a problem. But otherwise, I liked it very much. And this was the inspiration, the well-known work by Constantin Brâncuș. A nice idea, World Embrace Center as opposed to World Trade Center, finding inspiration in the Kiss by Constantin Brâncuș. Okay, and now we go to the second presentation today on Robert Maillart, remarkable Swiss engineer. But he was not born on the 6th of February, but on the 16th, and I apologize. I wish him happy birthday 10 days in advance. Robert Maillart, 1872-1940. So he was, I think, 15 years younger than Le Corbusier, older than Le Corbusier. I think Le Corbusier was born in 1887. Here was the man with an impressive mustache, although maybe less impressive than the ones sported by Nietzsche, more humorous in a way, but a remarkable engineer. So let's read a little bit about him. Now, I'm confused. Here I see it's written the 6th of February, but I checked yesterday and it says 16. Maybe they corrected on Wikipedia. When I made this presentation 1 or 2 years ago, the information was with the 6th of February, and that's why I included this presentation. But yesterday when I checked, and I double checked, was the 16th of February. Whatever. He was born in 1872, was a Swiss civil engineer who revolutionized the use of structural reinforced concrete with such designs as the three-hinged arch and the deck stiffened arch for bridges, and the beamless floor slab and mushroom ceiling for industrial buildings. His Salgina Tobel, I don't know what that is, Schanbach, 1933, bridges changed the aesthetics and engineering of bridge construction dramatically and influenced decades of architects and engineers after him. In 1991, this bridge was declared an international historic civil engineering landmark by the American Society of Civil Engineers. Robert Maillart, who died in 1940. Maillart did not excel in academic theories, but understood the necessity to make assumptions and visualize when analyzing a structure. A traditional method prior to 1900s was to use shapes that could be analyzed easily using mathematics. This overuse of mathematics annoyed Maillart, as he greatly preferred to stand back and use common sense to predict full-scale performance. Also, as he rarely tested his bridges prior to construction, only upon completion would he verify the bridge was adequate. He often tested his bridges by crossing them himself. This attitude towards bridge design and construction was what provided him with his innovative designs. This is very interesting. It means he was very intuitive. In a way, he was like an artist of structures. He didn't trust mathematical calculations. He trusted his instincts, and he didn't really verify the feasibility of the structures except through experience and starting with his own. This is very interesting. Very good, Maillart, Robert Maillart. So here he is, maybe even a melancholy man. I imagine a sensitive man, a brilliant man, no doubt. I mean, this was one of the greatest engineers of humankind, and with unusual methods. Hello, sir. Happy birthday to you. Either today or 10 days from now, both cases, you are very welcome to enchant us with your works. You can see even an eccentric, no? Didn't I say that there was an artist in him? It's obvious from this picture. You know, how many engineers would, position themselves in this way? He was human, with weaknesses and curiosities and so on. Self-mocking himself, nice. Some drawings of Robert Maillart. Engineering drawings, very elegant, because his works are very elegant, very, very, aesthetical. It's where engineering becomes art. And, if they also, were accurate in terms of calculations, even better. I had a chance to meet here on Zoom in 2020 a very interesting structural engineer from the United States, from Los Angeles, working for OVE Arup America, Bruce Danziger, and we became friends here on Zoom. A very knowledgeable man about architecture and culture in general, and very, very sensitive. And he worked with some of the best architects in the world for some very important works. Bruce Danziger, yes. I should have invited him today. Although in Los Angeles now is maybe, I don't know, 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. at the most. Robert Maillart, a sensitive engineer. And we need sensitive engineers, and maybe we need even more sensitive architects. Tavanaza Bridge. Of course, at that time, they didn't employ computers. It was all done manually. Look at the handwriting. Who would write like this on a not just engineering plan, or but architectural as well. And yet, forget the font, forget the writing. Look at the work. The built work is resolutely modern by today's standards as well. The tumultuousness of what's underneath is balanced perfectly by the elegance, the Apollonian beauty of the bridge. So when the engineer is coupled with a sensitive eye and a sensitive soul, you get such works. Good engineers don't like, banal structures. Good engineers, like good architects, want adventures in their field. They want to create something new. So what is new usually requires additional effort, sometimes troubles, rejections. It's unavoidable. Another bridge, Arve Bridge. I don't know if it's in Switzerland or not, but even here we see the appetite for aesthetics. Look at those columns. And then no, that there is complexity here, and there is an artistic complexity. You would say, when you look at this work, that here you had an engineer, but also, of course, you had an architect. No, in this case, the engineer was the architect. The engineer was the artist. Robert Maillart. I wish I knew more about engineering to, analyze the work, but I don't. I am very badly equipped for this kind of analysis, but I can appreciate it artistically, aesthetically, very much so. It's literally a sculptural work that happens to unite the two sides of a river. I think Brâncu should have loved it too. And by the way of bridge, I keep saying that the oldest definition of art that I found in Proto-Indo-European language, art, I read in English, art equals bridge equals God. This was the oldest meaning or definition of the word art that I found. Art equals bridge, like Maillart's bridge, and through extension equals God. Another bridge. I don't know where this is, but he was the king of bridges, no doubt. Just as Hans Wegner, the great Danish furniture designer, was the king of chairs. Maillart was the king of bridges. Another bridge. We remember a few days ago I made a presentation on Dutch architect who built many bridges in Amsterdam, but without being exceptional engineering works. I'm talking about Piet Kramer. He built bridges as an architect, but from an engineering point of view, they were not exceptional. Here we have an engineer build bridges with aesthetical virtues, with architectonic qualities. Now this one is more historicist. Maybe it was an earlier bridge by Robert Maillart, is possible. Or maybe he was required to make it historicist, is possible. As I said, he was with 15 years older than Le Corbusier. So, he was born close to the turn of the century, in the 19th century. Now, I don't know, was this built with stone or it was covered with stone? Because the structure we saw earlier were built in concrete. But here there seems to be stone. Another bridge. We start with nature, and here it is. This is probably one of his best bridges, if not the best. It's truly flying between two sides of the mountain. It's formidable. To be honest with you, if I was the engineer choosing to work on this bridge without being tested prior to being built, I would be a little bit afraid. But he probably trusted so much, not just his calculations, but also his instincts, that he didn't have troubles to work on his creation the first. Very interesting detail, no? That he tested the bridge himself. Now, of course, his weight was not so remarkable. So maybe the true test came when, vehicles and Putin's tanks. Let's hope that the Putin tanks will never arrive in Switzerland. Let's hope would not have arrived also in Ukraine, but they did arrive, unfortunately. Yeah, it's a glorious bridge. It is. Let's see how it is called. I don't know how to pronounce this. Salgina Tobel Bridge. Salgina Tobel Bridge. I guess something like this. Salgina Tobel Bridge in Switzerland. Robert Maillart. One of his best. Again, this was Schwanbach Bridge, Switzerland. Again, but this one is not so spectacular as the previous one. The previous one was also enhanced by the landscape, very dramatic. But this one, on the other hand, is curved in plan. So this, I guess, created an unusualness here. I almost felt like saying that Robert Maillart was better as an engineer than Minoru Yamasaki as an architect. Because this arch here made me think of that building that I showed by Minoru Yamasaki. But here the arch is not academic, it's not decorative. Yes, it has, willed shape, but I don't see it being informed or affected by academies. And as such, I think this work is superior to that work by Minoru Yamasaki. And yet we cannot say that Robert Maillart was not an architect, because this bridge has important aesthetical virtues, and he employs that arch, but without the weight of historicism. And even during construction is magnificent. I like this picture. I mean, even the scaffolding has aesthetical virtues. And of course, the Swiss build impeccably. Well, not always. Some of the buildings built by Peter Zumthor are not done impeccably at all. But that's because of the architect. What the Swiss build, they build very, very well. Whatever they do very, very well. Interesting bridge because it is curved in plan. Is that the engineer seen from behind? Who knows? Maybe yes, maybe not. It is impressive. I mean, most of these pictures show an impressive work. Another bridge, Bolchbach Bridge. This one curved as well. Smaller though. another one. They seem to employ the same principles. So I guess, he found a way to build these bridges, and, he built a number of them in the same way. What is this? Another bridge, Brücke. Maybe this is, but who knows? Maybe still in Switzerland. Almost futuristic. It has a dynamic quality that makes one think of futurism. Now look at this shed or house here. It has nothing to do with this bridge. This bridge belongs to the future. This house belongs to the past. It only shows how innovative Robert Maillart was. But too many bridges. I wish he built other things as well. Those legs, the bridge made me think of the curious arches or legs, I don't know how to call them, that Le Corbusier and Yanis Xenakis employed at La Tourette Monastery in France. I have now the means to show picture with a picture with what I'm referring to, but somehow the idiosyncratic choices of Le Corbusier and Yanis Xenakis stand in contrast with the logical beauty of these concrete legs that Robert Maillart employed in this bridge. They're artistic works in a way. They are sculpture. They are, yeah, he had an artistic side to him, no doubt. Maybe we can reposition the terms of that triple equation. Art equals bridge equals God. Maybe we could say bridge equals art equals God as well. Could we also say God equals art equals bridge? I don't know. Or maybe we could say art is a bridge between man and God. Too many bridges. I wish he built other things as well, not just bridges. It's getting a little bit tiring for me, sorry. Particularly since I don't have the tools to analyze them from an engineering point of view, and I just contemplate them with my eye and, other structures, that's good. So let's see a few other structures by Robert Maillart before we leave him. Cementhalle, factory for cement. Now I am beginning to be re-energized because I like what I see. It's not a bridge. And look at that shell, you know, the reinforced concrete is so thin, incredible. I don't quite understand what is happening because of the quality or the lack of quality of the picture, but even so is remarkable. Yes, the thinness of the reinforced concrete is remarkable. So he built a few other things besides bridges. What is a music pavilion? This one a little bit whimsical, but interesting. A little bit heavy, but interesting though. Clearly, he was an architect here. Robert Maillart. I don't know what this is. An interior, some kind of an office here with these columns. These columns, I think, would have been admired by Minoru Yamasaki as well. Although there seems to be less decoration in the case of Robert Maillart than in the case of Minoru Yamasaki. Here, the structural efforts are those that dictated the form, and it's not just a form, I think. Elegant and stable. Structural elegance. Maybe some kind of an industrial space. It looks like it, like some kind of a factory with some offices. But these columns are very elegant indeed. The negotiation between the horizontal plane, the slab, and the verticality of the columns is the interesting aspect here. It's not really a capital, you know, it's as if the slab is melting into the column and the column is growing into the slab. So the relationship between the horizontal and the vertical is not negotiated through a separated third element. It is as if they melt into each other. This is rather, it's not so common actually. Although in the drawing seems to be a little different, but here you don't see the separation. It's not so visible as it is in the drawing. Also, you see there are sophistications here which were probably justified by structural reasons, where the columns are thicker at the bottom and they become narrower and narrower towards the top. So there is also an organic quality in this structural work. It's not rigid. I mean, it's not as rigid as you know, a less skillful engineer would have done. You know, at the lower level it's like this, and at the higher level it's like this. The forest of columns, as Hölderlin would have called it, the forest of columns, and they do have nobility. These columns. concrete through and through, from top to bottom and from bottom to top. I don't know. I don't know exactly the function, but the structure again is very elegant and even more dramatic. Concrete can be beautiful indeed, but what can we do? Concrete pollutes. So we have a dilemma these days. Can we renounce to the services of concrete? In terms of pollution, it's not a sustainable material, but it has qualities. It affords a large variety of expressions, but it pollutes. Concrete pollutes. At that time, there was no concern with this, but today we do have to be concerned. I like this pavilion or whatever it is very much, this structure, this warehouse or whatever it is. Look at the structure, it's magnificent, and it is magnificent because it also has aesthetical virtues. It also has ornamental aspirations in a way. It's not just about the measurableness of transmitting the efforts from top to bottom. It's also about beauty. And it is not a beauty that is added to the structures, it's intrinsic to the structure. Surprising as well. He was a great engineer. I mean, this could have been done in wood. I saw structures not very different, you know, at the first sight from what we see here, but done with wood, not in concrete. This is rather unusual. Maybe something like this Antoni Gaudi would have done if he was an engineer and not an architect. If I am to express myself a little bit maybe superficial, because it has certain organicism, this architecture, that you would not easily expect from an engineer. Robert Maillart, builder, designer, and artist. You see, somebody interpreted things correctly here. Builder, designer, and artist. Strangely, the word engineer doesn't appear. And he was an engineer. That's it. So let's wish him happy birthday for today and for the 16th of February, if he was born on the 16th and not on the 6th of February. Thank you for being here.